Should I say morning glory, evening grace? I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and host of the Alex Marlow Show on the Salem Podcast Network. I'm in for my friend Hugh Hewitt. I got to say, I've been listening to Hugh for a couple of decades and never had the privilege to fill in, and that ends right now. So very happy to be here. I'll be here today and tomorrow. If you like what you hear, the Alex Marlow Show is the show on the Salem Network. You can catch it on weekends on Salem TV if you're watching that. And it's a daily news podcast, so hopefully you'll enjoy. Hugh and I have kind of hit it off lately because he was kind enough to promote my latest book, Breaking the Law, which is on the lawfare superstructure and the threat that it poses to the republic at this time, where I did a deep investigation into all of the lawfare against President Trump and the continuing lawfare against conservatives around the country that goes on, and I think is very relevant to some of the topics that we're going to discuss today. I will go back and touch on yesterday's E. Jean Carroll decision in the Second Circuit Court to temporarily, I would say, validate the punishments issued against President Trump there. And I think that will get overturned at the Supreme Court when it gets there. But that's a ways off, and we'll get there in a little bit. But there's a ton of news that we're going to hit throughout the show today. We're going to talk about this latest revision where jobs from last year revised down 900,000, which means that the one last humiliation for Joe Biden, he did have that big gash in his head. So maybe there are more humiliations to come with Biden, but he's not having a good week. Let's be honest. But also it says something very deep about the Fed, how the Fed really did move too slow to raise interest rates last time around and now lower interest rates. This time around, the economy could use a boost, and they're not giving it to us. And I think that it's something that is long overdue, and it'll put a lot of pressure on them coming up on that September Fed meeting that is very close, coming up fast. We'll also touch on, among other topics today, we'll touch on the Charlottesville. We got some new footage, which is going to be really disturbing. I'll have to give some real trigger warnings when we get to that, when it comes to the stabbing that took place. And the media reaction is somehow even worse than the murder, maybe. I mean, I guess nothing's worse than murder, but it just feels almost as bad because it feels very gross the way the people in the press are stretching and straining in order to do their best to try to make this something other than exactly what it was, which was a racial hate crime from a convicted felon who had no business being on the streets, targeting a white woman and a Ukrainian refugee at that. But we'll start today with what is, I think, potentially terrific news, but complex as always, as is everything in the Middle East. Israel's killed Hamas leaders in Doha. These are billionaires who had been exiled in Qatar, and they were living a very lavish lifestyle, a lot of them living in five-star resorts, and they'd been protected even though that they were behind or associated with some of the most heinous terror attacks of our time. And it's one of these ones where I'm very eager to figure out what the U.S.'s role in all this is. They likely approved the strikes, I think, given the nature of the strategic nature of that. And producer Dwayne had a theory that maybe perhaps they even helped refuel. So I'll be asking Joel Pollack, my colleague at Breitbart, who is an expert in all things Middle East, momentarily about what his take is on that and whether or not Trump had approved it personally. I don't know if he would have necessarily, just to kind of keep his hands clean, but it seemed like he was sending a signal a couple of days ago that this was an imminent attack, and it was a matter of Hamas coming to the table and trying to end this war, working to end this war. We were just hearing in the conservative media how maybe Hamas isn't all that bad lately. Maybe they're just a political organization. They're not a terror organization. Well, if that's the case, then why wouldn't they work harder to bring this thing to a close? They are not. They haven't. And now there is more devastation, and it really is at their own hands. This is an interesting thing because the U.S. has an airbase in Qatar. It's one of these things where you see how it would be almost impossible for a strategic attack at this level of precision to take place without the Americans getting involved. So then the big hope is, could this be the end of the war? Or is it just you move the deck chairs around, whoever survived out of the Hamas terrorist superstructure that they have, they go to Turkey or somewhere that's a NATO country, so then there can't be any strategic bombings of them there, and then they'll just go about their business if there's enough of them left. That is something that is a fear, but it does feel like this could be the most encouraging moment of this war in a while, because we do want to see this thing end, and we want to see the bad guys get held to account. So I'm eager to get more details from that, and we will get some of those momentarily with Joel Pollack, who will join me after the next commercial break. But I want to give you a texture of how they're discussing things on CNN, and because it is important. My first area of research was in the establishment media. I wrote a book called Breaking the News a few years ago where I did a deep dive into the nature of the way the corporate media does try to filter narratives that fit their corporate agenda and their left-wing agenda. So let's touch base on what could be a historic event that could bring about the end of a major war that has ravaged the Middle East for the last 2 years. Let's see how they're dealing with it. Here's Jack Reed and Dan Abash. Let's play cut one there, Dwayne.
Well, this certainly diminishes the prospects of returning the hostages, and particularly those that are still alive, because what Hamas is saying right now is that the United States lured these people into Qatar in order to set up the Israeli strike. So that undercuts our ability to be an interlocutor and someone that can help moderate a peace. And it certainly increases their disbelief in whether Netanyahu is serious about a ceasefire and a release of the hostages.
So one of the patterns that you'll see throughout the show today and throughout pretty much every news cycle these days is that the Democrats have cognitive dissonance whenever Trump does something well. If Trump does something right, it must be wrong just because Trump did it. And so this is clearly going to be associated with Trump, whether or not Trump was involved and to what level he was involved. But that's immediately where people's minds are going to go with this. And so they must announce this was bad. And so they must announce that this is actually an escalation and it's not something that could bring about the end of the war. Whereas if the shoe was on the other foot, then the conclusion would be the exact opposite. If this is a Democrat who was president at the time of an attack like this, then Jack Reed would be out there saying, oh, this is the exact type of thing that could lead to the end of the war. Now the hostages may finally come home because they're proving that there's no more Mr. Nice Guy. People aren't messing around. There's a new sheriff in town. That would be the whole attitude. But that's not the attitude now because, again, you have to rush to a microphone, you have to rush to a camera setup as fast as humanly possible to announce that Donald Trump is a bad guy. That is a number one goal for the Democrats right now, and that will be a theme. So mark that down. The interview continues. I actually like this clip I find this to be even more interesting. Let's play cut two there, guys.
Well, this attack was extraordinarily disruptive of whatever peace process, even one that was very faltering. I think it was a signal by Netanyahu that he really does not want an agreement with Hamas. He wants to literally destroy Hamas, which means, in many respects, continued fighting in Gaza.
Is this news to anyone that Netanyahu wants to destroy Hamas? Netanyahu's singular purpose is to destroy Hamas. I think that explains his entire political longevity, is that I think he sees this as his life mission, his political mission, his religious mission, if you want to get to that level. I think he feels like he's put here on earth to try to destroy Hamas. I think that is his number one priority. It always has been. And I think that's why he's been able to maintain power for as long as he has, because people do see him as the guy to do that. And so to announce that, well, he's just trying to destroy Hamas. Yes, absolutely. He's trying to destroy Hamas. Now, he tries to do it in a strategic way. I don't think he wants to do it in a way that's going to make it so that he loses political capital completely, that he loses the ability to be able to operate on a diplomatic plane throughout the world. I think he's cautious and calculating enough in that regard. But overall, Netanyahu is, of course, here to destroy Hamas because Hamas deserves it, because they are not only the ones who are sponsoring terrorism, they're not only the ones who perpetrated the October 7th attack, but they're also the ones who are the reason why any starvation that you might be seeing in the media is all from Hamas, because Hamas is controlling the way the food and the aid is being distributed to the people in Gaza, and they're doing this to manipulate people politically. They're doing this to manipulate people online, because if they control it and then they blame the Israelis and they blame the United States of America for our support of Israel, then they see that as a way to gain political capital. That's what Netanyahu is against. And to be frank with you, that's exactly the right approach that needs to be taken to deal with these brutal terrorists. When we come back, Joel Pollack is going to give us more details. He's our top guy in the Middle East at Breitbart News, knows all things Israel. You're going to enjoy it. I'm Alex Marlow, very pleased to be in for Hugh Hewitt. We're still trying to get Joel Pollack here set. I'm Alex Marlow, by the way, host of the Alex Marlow Show on the Salem Podcast Network, in for Hugh Hewitt today. I'm very happy to be here. Hugh's got an amazing setup here, by the way. No wonder he seems like he's in a good mood all the time. These happy warriors. This is nice. They got a nondescript building here. There's no way to find us. Completely secret. And but still, you go outside, and it's beautiful Southern California, Orange County weather. Lovely, lovely. All right, I want to bring up something that I think this is tough to watch, but it's important to get a flavor of this. We're still getting trickling in information, video footage of what happened to Irina Zarutska, who is the Ukrainian refugee who was stabbed by a 14-time felon, or I guess 14-time criminal who'd been released 14 times from prison. I want to make sure I'm careful here so I don't get accused of defamation. But they released 15 seconds of additional video, and I'm not sure why only 15 seconds. I'm not quite understanding this, but I want to play this for you. This is if you are faint of heart or of prone to not enjoying these sorts of things, I understand it. Just divert your eyes for 15 seconds if you're watching on any of the streams here. But go ahead and roll this, Dwayne. So what you see here in this video is she's been stabbed. She's now bleeding out to death, and she looks shocked. She's sobbing. She is completely alone. She's in sort of a fetal position type posture, these last moments of her life. And every single person in the train does nothing. No one comes to her aid. No one comforts her at all. No one acts alarmed. Everyone acts sort of slightly, vaguely disturbed by what's going on. But presumably they're aware that something horrible has happened, and no one comforts her at all. There's no humanity there at all. And this is very disturbing to me because you have to wonder when you're seeing this clear pattern of demonic influence within the United States these days. I mean, I take for example, the trans shooter who shows up at a church and guns down children while they're praying. I mean, there's something going on and with our humanity at this point. And I don't understand what's the point of this specific 15-second footage because we're missing a lot of context here, and I think it's only going to raise more questions than answers. But just note how there were people rushing to the cameras yesterday, Van Jones being one of them on CNN, who was out there and trying to act as though that this was not some sort of a racial hate crime when there was reports or I guess footage suggesting the guy is yelling, "I got the white girl." And we all know what would have happened if this was the shoe was on the other foot, if this was a black man stabbing if there's a white man stabbing a black woman or a black man for that matter. We know what would have happened with the Al Sharptons and the Van Joneses. Remember Van Jones talked about how he doesn't want a white lash or there's a white lash going on. That's why Trump won. These people see the world through the lens of race, and then all of a sudden you see solid evidence of someone committing some sort of a racial hate crime. They try to immediately explain it away if they're forced to talk about it at all. Truly disturbing. We've got this clip here. Why don't we roll this cut 10 here, guys?
Let me just say a couple of things. One is, what happened to that young woman was horrible. And it's everybody's nightmare. If you're in any public space, subway, whatever, that something bad's going to happen to you or somebody you care about. So it does strike a chord. We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering. It's wrong. Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass.
Okay, pause.
Even when you...
So, but the point about the George Floyd case is George Floyd was on fentanyl and he was resisting arrest. He also had a criminal record. And there's no evidence that there was any racial motivation at all with that particular case. Now, I don't like that Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck or around his neck, whatever it was, for 8.5 minutes. I don't think that's a good look for police. I don't think it's positive. In fact, there should be consequences. That's my position on that. There's no evidence that there was anything racial, period. Think about the George Zimmerman case, which is one of the original ones of these sensational racial cases, where they acted as though that George Zimmerman preyed on a black boy, when in actuality, George Zimmerman was not white, he was Hispanic. And then there was a huge scuffle to the point where George Zimmerman had his head all ripped up in the back, bleeding, the back of his skull, showing a really intense scuffle took place. And that was covered up by the media for days afterwards, while everyone rallied to try to act as though there's some sort of a lynching going on in this country, that there is some sort of a white uprising that's taking place. So we know exactly what would have happened if the races were reversed here. And the fact that this is the behavior, it actually, I think, is going to increasingly intensify any racial tensions and divisions there are. Now, I grew up in West LA. My first boss in the conservative movement was Larry Elder. I don't live in this world. We're reintroducing a world that is not colorblind. Where I grew up as a conservative person, everyone was colorblind. There was not even a thought that you would see race and color when you interact with other people. They're teaching us to see this way by blatantly denying what we're seeing. He says twice, "I got that white girl." And Van Jones out there on CNN, CNN's okay with this, saying that this is nothing to do with race. In fact, the bad guy is Charlie Kirk. And I was on Charlie's show yesterday. Charlie was conducting a responsible discussion, but he's trying to say things that other people are afraid to say. which is the truth in many cases, unfortunately, with this particular topic at this particular time. Let's roll the rest of the cut.
You had a white police officer murder a black man on live television. The whole world saw. There were no sweeping changes. In fact, not one law was passed at the federal level. So I think that's an important thing to point out. The other thing is, you mentioned the thing about cashless bail. I think this is a big challenge that we have. Would you have felt better if there had been cash bail and the mom had come and put down $1,000 to let him out? It's not about cashless bail or no cashless bail. It's about the fact that we don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people hurt people. What happened was horrible, but it becomes an opportunity for people to jump on bandwagons. And then for someone like Charlie Kirk, he should be ashamed of himself. No one mentioned the word race, white, black, or anything except him. What people mentioned is the horror of what happened.
You have to admire the confidence. He holds his shoulders back. He speaks incredibly articulately, and he declares something that's blatantly false. The guy mentions white girl twice. And it's obvious that that's what that was about. And so I want to see all the people, we're all the Ukrainian activists. We're all the people who are obsessed with the Ukraine war and would like for the Ukraine war to never stop getting funded. Whatever your take is on Putin, the people who are Adam Kinzinger, who had Slava Ukraini to his X handle on X the Everything app. I want to see all these people out there for this Ukrainian refugee and standing with her and standing up to her, standing up to all these people who are trying to shut down the discussion of what really happened so that there is nothing that we learn from this event. There are things that can be learned and that we need to reset on law and order in this country. That's part of the reason why I wrote Breaking the Law, is because the nature is that the people on the left, they do not think of law and order as a value. The values that they have are things that advance Democrat politics, left-wing politics. And when Democrats run these cities and they think the way to deal with too much crime is to let criminals back on the street so that you don't count their crime, you don't count as a felony. So temporarily the crime stats go down, but the cities get more dangerous. That's been their policy for decades in all the major cities. I've lived in them. I've lived in Washington, D.C., lived in Los Angeles. That is the policy there in those single-party towns. That's not working. It's not working anymore. The people get it. And Donald Trump and Tom Homan and all these people who are in charge with enforcing the law in this country are now starting to get the picture that this is not just an 80-20 issue. This is the proverbial 97-3 issue. And I will tell you this. Black Americans know this as well as anyone, that there's too much violence in our cities and it needs to stop now. And people like Van Jones, if he's going to keep talking this way, then he's going to be part of the problem, because people want to sort this stuff out. People want to see the bad guys away from polite society, away from our Ukrainian refugees. Who would disagree with that? Maybe 3% of you. And I guess all of them work at CNN or MSNBC. Alex Marlow in for Hugh, and happy to be here. You know, it's really fun because Salem has the best producers, and it's been great to meet Dwayne, who is a friend of friends for so long. I know Dwayne knew Andrew Breitbart. My friend Larry O'Connor and Dwayne are close for such a long time, and so it's very fun. And you guys are strewn all throughout the Salem network. The great Sean McConnell, who used to be with Prager, is now with Larry Elder, Alan Estrin, of course. You guys really have amazing producers. It actually speaks to the quality of the host and the company. You guys retained some good people, so it's nice to meet some of your favorites. And Dwayne had flagged this clip from Caroline Leavitt's White House press briefing where she's talking about this Ukrainian girl who was murdered, and the media just has no idea how to deal with this, even though we've been telling them you need to learn how to deal with this, and this is the reason why your credibility is at zero. And Dwayne, I did send you that clip where he's yelling, "I got that white girl" in the train. So it's for Van Jones to go out there and act so confident this has nothing to do with race. It's just so idiotic. But hey, that's why no one watches CNN. We just wait for the clips to come out online, and then we make fun of the clips. That's what happens. No one's watching these shows. Though I had to say, Kara Swisher in there in that last clip we played, Dwayne, great haircut. Looks just like mine. Same haircut. So it's the
same barber.
I got to figure out who does her hair.
Same barber.
We actually do the same barber. This is not a joke. This is not. We literally the same barber. It's not. It's not a joke.
It sure looks like it.
Yeah, it's the same one. It's the same cut. Yeah. So those guys are missing it. If you notice that her haircut is same as mine, it's because it is. It's literally the same haircut. Okay. So Caroline Leavitt, White House press briefing. She goes ham here, and it's well worth a listen. Let's get to it. Cut 12, please.
Today, I would like to address the tragedy that has not received nearly enough media attention: the brutal murder of Irina Zarutska. Here are the facts that many outlets have shamefully and intentionally failed to report until President Trump drew attention to it. On August 22nd, Irina Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina, by a savage career criminal. This is a public transportation system that many in the area use every single day to go to school and work. Irina was on the train that night traveling home from her job at a pizzeria, still in uniform from her shift. This beautiful, innocent 23-year-old young woman was a Ukrainian refugee who had recently fled her country for a chance at a safer life and a promising new beginning here in the United States of America. But tragically, a public transportation system in a major American city was more dangerous than the active war zone that she left. The president and the entire White House are praying for her family and friends during this unimaginably difficult time. But while we extend our thoughts and prayers, we must also seek justice for this crime and call attention to this heinous incident. Surveillance video of the killing was finally released to the public this past Friday. It shows the alleged killer, DeCarlos Brown Jr., pull out a knife, get up from his seat behind Irina, and prepare to thrust a blade into her neck before the released footage gets cut. This is pure evil on full display. The most enraging and unacceptable part of this story is that her death was entirely preventable. DeCarlos Brown never should have been on that train that night. In fact, he should have been behind bars. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge, and he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023.
Okay,
Despite all of this,
so far, this is a terrific list of information that everyone needs, and it's interesting because you would think that the front page New York Times story that would cover this, if you're a New York Times reader and you relied on the New York Times for your information, or if you were someone who relied on CNN, that you'd get this stuff on their broadcasts. It's a really simple 1 minute, top of the hour news break. This is what happened. These are the details of who this person was. You don't get any of that. None of that is a factor here because the media don't want you to know about this story. They want you to feel like this is just local crime. It's not local crime. This is so much more than that, and it's so representative of so many things. I'll play more from this clip in a little bit, but we learned that the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has said that Charlotte, an investigation, a probe into Charlotte's transit system is beginning today, and he says he believes they should lose federal funds. We need to start ramping up the consequences. We need to start ramping up the consequences for judges who let criminals back on the street easily. We need to start ramping up the consequences for transit systems that rely on federal funds and do not have any remote capacity to keep people safe and do not even consider that maybe it should be part of their responsibility to make sure that there aren't, hardened criminals murdering people on their trains. That's a good place to start. We need to start judging people in certain ways. Not all the time, not for everything, but occasionally we need to start working into the discussion whether or not there are some people in our society who may have let Irina Zuritsky down. Let's take a look at the judges. Let's take a look at the transit systems. Let's take a look at the people who let this hardened criminal out in the street, ready to do crime, ready to do harm to innocents. And then also, there's people in the video who wouldn't lift a finger to help a dying girl on a train. Sad state of affairs in this country, unfortunately. We got to do better. We're back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast, 5-day-a-week show, wherever you get your pods on the Salem Podcast Network. And now we have David Drucker with us, the Dispatch senior political writer. He's at David M. Drucker on X, the Everything app. David, it's really nice of you to be here, and it's nice to meet you. So you write for the Dispatch, I write for Breitbart. I've got a couple of specifics in Washington I want to touch on with you. But overall, I'm familiar with some of your work, and you seem like a really, really sharp guy and a conservative. Just give me your perspective as someone who's maybe not a pro-Trump guy, but a conservative on your evaluation, honestly, on where we're at so far in the first 6 months, 7 months into the administration.
Well, look, I think that if you're a Trump supporter, you've got to be pleased. He's very active. He's delivering on the things that he campaigned on. Obviously, for people that are not Trump supporters, and I'm talking Democrats here, but also some sort of old guard Reaganite Republicans, there's a lot of concern about the president's sort of expansive use of executive authority. Obviously, the administration continues to make a legal case for why its actions are lawful and constitutional. Some of that has been backed up by the courts, some of it hasn't. I think a lot of this has yet to play out fully. But as always with Trump, people seem to either really like him or really dislike him.
Yeah.
with very few people in the middle.
Well, that's what's interesting is that you see his approval ratings with Republicans, and it's some of the highest we've ever seen, if not the highest. But then with Democrats, it's zero. And so I am interested to see people who are Republican but not necessarily pro-Trump. It seems like mostly coming around. But when you're talking about the executive actions in particular, is the objection more respect to law and order, constitutionality, or is it that you think it's a political strategy that could backfire long term? What are the main beefs there?
Well, I don't know if I have beefs, but I'm just trying to answer your question as an analyst.
Oh no, I'm not asking you to speak just on your. I'm just saying in general, just your audience. Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or.
Yeah. No,
like
listen. Look, there are some things Trump has done that sort of unites Republicans across the spectrum, right? From the strongest Trump supporter you can think of to somebody who wishes he never ran for office.
Right.
I'm thinking, some matters of foreign policy, his decision to strike Iran after the Israeli attack,
Sure.
and some other things that he's done. I think a lot of the complaints, at least on the right, will be that the president's he's identifying problems. Let's take law and order. Let's take crime, for instance, right? I think the president's identifying that there are a problem in many urban cities across the country. People feel as though there's a problem. So even though we can demonstrate that crime has gone down since the height of the pandemic and the year after, it's still far too high for anybody's liking. And so then the debate is, well, do I prefer Trump's solution or do I prefer a different kind of solution? The political arguments can then be go in many directions. If you're a Democrat who says, for instance, Trump's right, crime's a problem, but his solution is wrong, then we've got a policy debate. If you're a Democrat who says crime's going down, I don't know why Trump's doing anything.
Yes.
Well, okay, good luck with that argument.
Right.
And there are Democrats on all sides of that issue. That party is involved in a very vigorous debate about its future. And I think with a lot of Reaganite Republicans, there is not on really matters of foreign policy where they've often given the executive a lot of deference, but on matters of domestic policy, how and where do you deploy the U.S. military, never mind the National Guard, on American soil, whether or not criminals, illegal immigrants even are afforded due process. I think for conservatives of the old school, even if they like the ultimate outcome, they're not going to like it if they feel like it's extra constitutional. And I think for a lot of populists, this is your area of expertise.
Sure.
There's a feeling that we've been hampered by the rules for so long, and it's not that we should break the rules, but maybe we should look at them differently. And so I think those are the differences between the different kinds of Republican or conservative in America.
I think largely that's right. And I think part of it is just an approach to testing out the rules, because one thing that I just finished writing a book about lawfare, and I recommend strongly that President Trump doesn't do anything extra lawful. And if there's a court order that comes down, you got to abide by it. You can't go around it, because that would be devastating, I think, to the country to do that. And I think he's largely done that. So he'll test things out, and then a third of them or 40% might get thrown out, and then he can't take those actions. But then he'll get a bunch of the agenda through that where courts will uphold it. And so that is sort of the process that seems to be playing out. But I want to get into a couple specifics with you. One of them with Chicago. He's deploying a lot more resources to Chicago to try to deal with crime, specifically illegal immigration. But I think there's reason to believe it's going to go beyond then. What is happening there, and what do you think is the correct approach?
Well, look, I think voters are uneasy about U.S. military deployments versus National Guard deployments. I also think it depends on how you deploy the Guard or extra law enforcement agencies and where you deploy them. If it's cosmetic versus really getting into neighborhoods that need the extra help. And then I also think it depends on how some of these states handle it. I mean, obviously, Governor Pritzker and the mayor of Chicago have been very resistant to the idea that sort of anything extra needs to be done. And you compare that to Governor Wes Moore in Maryland and the governor and the mayor of Baltimore, who are now working together to put state police working together with the Baltimore City Police so that you have extra law enforcement and extra policing. And in fact, the mayor of Baltimore has spearheaded a policy, my colleague John McCormick wrote about it, where they're keeping people in jail longer, and they're doing a whole bunch of things to try and get crime to acceptable levels. It never goes away. I live on Capitol Hill in Washington. I like
Right.
living here. I choose to live here. It's never going away, but it's about acceptable levels.
Yeah, and what do you make of the reaction with basically every Democrat attack as though crime is not a problem? It feels like I think you would recommend them acknowledge crime's a problem and recommend other approaches, but they're not doing that. They're sort of acting as though everything is fine and Trump's nuts for pointing it out.
Well, I think some are actually. I've just, the Democratic Party's gotten so interesting because they're leaderless for the first time in a generation and really having
it's
this
true.
big internal debate, that there are a lot of Democrats that are in fact saying we need to do something, just not what Trump is doing. And I think there's an argument to make that there are other things that would be more effective and more in line with the Constitution. And ultimately, it's up to voters to decide, what they prefer.
David, hang with me for another brief segment. Give me a couple of those examples when we come back. And plus, I want to get your take on Trump and Senator Thune pushing through a bunch of Trump's appointments, changing rules to do that with a massive backlog that we have in place. David Drucker's still on the line with me from The Dispatch. He's a senior political writer there. He's at David M. Drucker on X, the Everything app. David, I got to do parter because we're short on time, and I want to get your take on both. So first of all, give me a couple police recommendations for how to get crime in order without taking some of the militarized tactics that Trump is taking. And then after that, I want to get your thoughts on Trump and Senator Thune changing the rules to try to push through this backlog of nominees. Go for it.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you need more police on the streets, and you need to keep offenders in jail longer. I mean, this is stuff that worked when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s when people in California got fed up with crime. It's the kind of thing that'll work again, and you can't keep the military deployed indefinitely. You can't keep the National Guard deployed indefinitely. So you have to look for things that work and can work indefinitely, as long as policymakers at the city level make the right choice. As far as the rules change in the Senate, look, the U.S. Congress, no matter who the president is, keeps giving away its power. And I understand the frustration with the president's nominees. I remember Harry Reid and the Democrats voicing the same kind of frustrations back when Republicans in the Obama era were blocking Obama nominees. And so they changed the rules, and that's a choice that they're perfectly able to make, but it means that the executive branch gets more power. And I find it interesting that Congress doesn't really want its own power. And so, what do they plan to do when the next president comes along and it's not their guy? And they go right back into these tactics. And it just keeps happening over and over again. And when I ask Democrats and Republicans who's to blame, they always point the finger at the other guy. One of them's right, one of them's wrong. It really doesn't matter.
What do you make of the fact that Senator Thune is leading the way on this? Because he's a pretty moderate guy. He seems like he gets along with all sides. He's a friend. He's a friend to all dogs, if you will. And so, but he's the one who's championing it, saying, "I can't deal with this anymore. I've had enough. We're going to make some changes."
Yeah, listen, this is not a criticism of Senator Thune, who I've covered for a long time. The point I'm making is that he sounds exactly like the late Senator Harry Reid 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when he pulled the nuclear option. Now, this is a different sort of nuclear option. It's not as big of a deal, to be clear. But Harry Reid, I can't believe this Republican obstruction. It's not fair. They blew the nuclear option so that they could lower the threshold for judges. And then, of course, Democratic obstruction led Republicans to do the same thing for Supreme Court justices. And so it goes. But the end result, though, is that Congress has less power and leverage against the president. And I just find it interesting that the Supreme Branch doesn't seem to want to operate like the Supreme Branch, and that they don't even work together to say, we need to maintain this power to have against presidents that we don't think are doing things right. So how can we figure this out amongst themselves? I get the human frustration. I'm just saying it keeps happening regardless of who's in charge.
Yeah, that is true. It's a great perspective, and I appreciate you taking the time with me on the Hugh Hewitt Show. That's David Drucker, David M. Drucker on X, the Everything app. His writings in The Dispatch. I'm Alex Marlow, author of Breaking the Law, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast. 2 more hours here on the Hugh Hewitt Show today and on the Salem News Channel as well. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast on the Salem Radio Network and also on weekends on salemnewschannel.com. Those of you who have not checked that out, very cool, very classy broadcast over there. Classy people. And we got a big hour. We got Senator Mark Wayne Mullen coming in, as well as we're talking to Byron York. So it should be really good. And then a lot of news, big news day. Before we get into it, Hugh's got some amazing sponsors. And one of them is Americans for a Balanced Budget. You go to StopHealthCostHikes.com. Congress's approval of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was a defining victory for President Trump and the American people, but that win is now at risk. Unless Congress acts before the end of the year, a massive health care tax hike will hit millions of Americans. Americans for a Balanced Budget is sounding the alarm. Key health care tax credits are set to expire on December 31st. If they lapse, 24 million Americans could face skyrocketing health care costs. Millions may lose coverage entirely. Rural communities would be hit especially hard with job losses, fewer providers, and reduced access to care. Congress must act this year to protect these vital tax credits for Americans who buy their own health insurance. President Trump's pollster found that 77% of voters, including over 70% of Trump supporters, are more likely to vote for candidates who preserve these credits. Americans for a Balanced Budget is calling on Congress to keep the full promise of the one big beautiful bill by stopping a devastating health care tax hike before the year's end. Your voice counts. Visit StopHealthCostHikes.com to tell Congress, act now, protect tax credits, and prevent higher health care costs. Stop rising costs before it's too late. Visit StopHealthCostHikes.com today. I had a great talk with David Drucker at the end of the last hour, and that'll dovetail nicely into my conversation with Mark Wayne Mullen, which we'll have in a few minutes, where I will talk about what we just discussed in terms of budgeting, in terms of bills. I'm going to get him his take on the fiscal year, which is winding down the end of September. We always act like it's a shock. I spent 8 years in Washington, and every time end of September comes around, like, I can't believe it, fiscal year's ending, we're not prepared. And we were told finally we were going to get appropriations bills this time around, that we were going to get, instead of one big omnibus or a CR or some way of funding all sorts of the crap that's in the government, at the same time, we're going to get the 12 appropriations that we were supposed to get. And from the way I'm handicapping it, and I'm thankfully very deeply sourced, the editor of Breitbart, of what's going on in Washington, and I'm thinking maybe we could get 3 appropriation bills if we're lucky, and then a CR covering the other 9. It really should not be the case, and we should have more transparency, more accountability in terms of where our money is being spent. And so it's really important that anyone who's doing that watchdog work, very, very important to do that. And I will get a take from the senator on where that negotiation is heading. And then we'll talk about these nominees that are blocked by not just by the Democrats. But one thing that's noteworthy here is that the Democrats are actually blocking people they would support because they're trying to run out the clock. And this is something that I learned during my time in Washington that is a fundamental fact, and something that really drives a lot of what takes place is that there is a clock, like an NBA game or an NFL game. There is a clock ticking, in particular on the executive branch. That is their most scarce resource. And when you're a Democrat Party and you're looking at Trump's agenda with these executive actions that we were talking about earlier on the show, and we're looking at the fact that he's got both majorities in both houses of Congress, they're trying to get to the midterm election as soon as possible. Now, things aren't looking great for them overall as of now, but you never know if there is going to be some of these new members of Trump's coalition who might not show up in a midterm election without Trump on the ballot. And you never know if a few people who are voting, let's say, on fiscal security issues, and they're not feeling as great about the economy as they would like to, maybe they opt out or maybe even pull the trigger for a Democrat come 2026. The Democrats are just trying to get there, and they're going to get there by trying to eat up time, eat up clock, so that the nominees for President Trump don't get confirmed to start working. They don't want them to get working. So all the Republicans want to do is batch together a few nominees. This has been something that's been done in the past. Have them get voted on by a voice vote. These are all things that are supposed to be sort of non-controversial nominees. These aren't really the dramatic ones. These are ones that are not going to be household names for the most part. And the Democrats are still blocking them, even though when it ultimately comes down to it, they might support them. Why are they doing this? The strategy is do not let Republicans operate freely and with impunity. That's the name of the game for them. And it's a decent political strategy. And one thing that was interesting in my conversation with David Drucker is him saying that John Thune's acting like Harry Reid. Well, a lot of people from my perspective in the conservative movement, someone who's been a lifelong conservative, I was a college Republican, and I've always been a registered Republican since I was 18 years old. I'm 39 now. And one of the things that always struck me as unbelievable is we, with superior ideas, with people of higher character, people with greater moral fortitude, people with better literacy in the Constitution, people like my friend Hugh, who are so good in these subject matters, then we would watch somehow Democrats would still beat us. They would still get stuff done when they would win at a rate that was much quicker than we would. And one of the reasons why is because they were willing to get, let's say, more creative with the rules in order to make sure that they got stuff done. And when they ran into a rule that they didn't like, they weren't afraid to say, well, does it have to be that way? And we don't want to break the law ever. I think that, as I recommended, I don't think if a judge puts down an order, even if it's an order we don't like, we shouldn't go around it. We should wait for the next battle. We should find a different lane. You don't want to, there are lines you cannot cross. But if you're looking at something where you're seeing Democrats blocking stuff for purely political purposes, and they're taking this approach that anything Donald Trump does, anything the Republican does at this time, must be wrong by virtue of the fact that Trump did it, if they're going to continue to operate from that perspective, then we need to be able to find ways to get some stuff done, because you are allowed to do stuff when you're elected. And this was the whole principle that was put forth during the first Trump administration, that, as I think best exemplified by the fact that the government was shut down because Trump wanted $5 billion for his wall. $5 billion, which would have been a fraction, within a few miles of wall. And the Democrats got the government shut down and then basically blamed, who was it, Ted Cruz and Trump? Like they successfully blamed Republicans for it, because they won $5 billion for Trump's signature piece of legislation, which he won the election because the American people wanted him to accomplish that of all things, to build a border wall. And he said, we're putting $5 billion, that's all we want. That's it. And Democrats said, nope, we're going to shut down the government and you guys are going to be the ones who are blamed, and it worked. So when you start seeing it from that perspective, they understand that they want to win wars of attrition against us. They want to outlast us. A lot of discussion today is about crime, will continue to be about crime. Part of it is because the Democrats are looking at this, which what should be not an 80-20 issue. It should be that 97-3 issue. We want more law and order. We want safer streets. And if you approach anyone in private, they're all going to agree that our cities are becoming disgraceful. Year after year, we see an increasing level of crime in our cities. It feels less safe to go out at night. It's less fun. It was interesting for me. I live just north of LA in an area that's somewhat conservative. And it is great for families, and we walk to school, and T-ball and weekends at the park are a dream. It's pure Mayberry. But when you want to eat and shop, I drive down into LA. And the second you get there, it's more of a bummer. People are more stressed out. People are a little more reserved, because they know that it's not safe there as much as it used to be. There are more tent cities. There is more drug dealing that's taking place. The illegal immigration has been more solidified in the culture over time. And all of these things we've taken as acceptable. Donald Trump is acting as a, well, maybe we should reconsider that. Maybe perhaps we should look at, of course, places like Washington, D.C. with home rule and say, well, maybe we should do something. And then now even the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, and other members of the D.C. City Council are going, actually, this is kind of nice to have some of those federal resources being used to make it so that my city's safer. But we're not going to see that in Chicago or Illinois, particularly because Governor J.B. Pritzker is there and he's running for president, and he's going to act as though everything is under control. Because if Trump comes in and helps clean up Chicago, what that's going to mean is an admission that Pritzker himself had not done his job as governor, keeping the people of Chicago safe. This is the important premise here. Law and order is not a left-wing value. It's not a Democrat value. And if Donald Trump does it, by virtue of the fact that it was Trump, they're going to come from a premise that, as a default, Trump was wrong. Once you understand that fundamental principle, you start questioning a lot of stuff about what's going on in this country. Marlowe in for Hewitt today. Please hit a nice subscribe on the Alex Marlowe Show podcast, wherever you like to get your pods, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, whatever it is. He's been very kind to let me fill in. I'll be here tomorrow as well. And he's got some great sponsors. As I said, Consumer Cellular is another one, 1-800-411-4454. Have you looked at your cell phone bill lately? How much data are you actually using, and how much data are you buying? Have you looked at all the hidden fees and surcharges, or have you noticed that your bill has gone up recently? After you check your bill, check out Consumer Cellular, where you really get savings without sacrifice. Only takes about 20 minutes to switch, and you will get $25 off using Hugh25, H-U-G-H, hug with an H. Hugh25, call 1-800-411-4454 or log in to consumercellular.com/Hugh. New customers get a $5 credit on your first 5 monthly invoices. Visit consumercellular.com/Hugh for details. And don't forget, if you're 50 or older, you get 2 unlimited lines for $60. That's $30 each line, unlimited. That's very inexpensive. It really is. You can better manage your cost of living, your essential expenses, by using Consumer Cellular and get $25 off using promo code HUGH25. Savings without the sacrifice. Use my promo code HUGH25 or call 1-800-411-4454. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen is on with me. Senator, I know your time is scarce. I really appreciate it. And you've had about the best explanation of the Senate rule changes, why they're necessary, what's taking place, the historical precedent by trying to get through some of these nominees through that the Democrats are blocking. Even nominees they probably support, they're still blocking them. Tell me what's going on and what we're doing.
So here's what our path forward is. Well, let me back this up. Let me first of all explain to you what we're having to do, Alex. In the history of the United States, we have never had a president get all his nominees filibustered, except I'd say all of them. It's been all but Marco Rubio, and give you some perspective. Going all the way back prior to Obama. Usually around 98% of all the nominees outside of cabinet and judicial nominees were voice voted on. And because, really the ones we're talking about are people that you couldn't even name, positions you don't even know exist. And so, and then when President Trump came in place, they dropped it down to 60%, Trump 45. It was 90% with Obama, 98% with Bush 43, Clinton and Bush 41, Reagan. You can go back to Jimmy Carter. You can keep going back, and it was usually well over 90%. Trump was the first time it dropped below 90, and it was at 60%. Then underneath Biden, it was 57%, and now underneath Trump 47, it's zero. So what Chuck Schumer has decided to do is that he's going to filibuster every single person that's coming up. Now, what we've decided to do is we're going to make a rule change, and this rule change basically reflects what the traditional way that things were done in the Senate, meaning that outside the cabinet, outside judicial nominees, and with the exception of a few ambassadors, you did voice vote or unanimous consent on blocks. We call them en blocs. So because Chuck Schumer has done what he's decided to do, we're now going to make a tradition, to which Congress has always did. We're going to make it now into a permanent rule change where we're going to bring up these individuals in blocks of 5, 20, 30, 40, or even 50. And we're going to have a regular 2-hour debate. It may end up being a 30-hour debate. We still got to do that. But for us to do that, we got to overrule the chair several times. And that starts actually tonight. So tonight, Leader Thune is going to file a motion to proceed to a rule change, to which the Democrats then, I know this gets wonky, but this is the way the House works, or the Senate works, is we got to pursue to a rule change that is going to probably trigger a response from the Democrats, which is going to cause procedural motions. And eventually we got to wear them out on the procedural motions before we can move on to the first one, and that would be to overrule the chair by having to have a rule change with either, depending on the rule, it could be 60 or 67 votes to simple majority. Now, the first time this has happened, by the way, is when Harry Reid did this when Obama was in, and so it's not like this is the first time it's happened. It was happened again in 2017 and again in 2019. And then once we proceed to that rule change, that'll be to do an en bloc. If we can overrule the chair, which we can, then we made to do the debate time where we limit the debate from a 30-hour debate on the en bloc. We'll do the debate at 2 hours, and that'll take a second procedural motion for us to overrule the chair again, and then we will proceed straight into clearing the president's nominee backlog and putting his people in place, which the American people elected him to do back in November.
All right, so this is something that I think was proposed by Amy Klobuchar in 2023, basically the same
2023,
rule
that's
change.
right.
Yeah, what was the circumstances around that? Why wasn't it adopted then? And what's the difference here? Is there any?
It actually did pass the committee at the time. What Amy she had tried to go around Tuberville's block. Tuberville had put a hold on everything moving forward, every nominee moving forward, because I won't rehash it, because of a circumstance that was taking place in Alabama. And so for her to go around him, she proposed this exact language that we're putting forth, except she had it limited to 10. We're not going to limit ours to 10 because we have such a tremendous backlog of individuals waiting to be put in position that's already went through the confirmation process in the committees. We are instead of doing 10, we're going to do bigger blocks. But this exact same language, every Democrat voted for. The reason why they didn't follow through with the final change is because Senator Tuberville lifted his hold and prevented that. And once they did that, we started going back to doing in blocks by voice vote and unanimous consent, which has always been done. The Democrats refused to play ball with that. That's why we're having to make the rule change to do exactly what Amy had wanted to do in 23.
So the talk right now is that you guys are degrading the Senate by doing this, and yet it's the same thing that they proposed 18 months ago.
That's right. And there's other media outlets too, Alex, that are saying that this is a nuclear option. We didn't go nuclear. Chuck Schumer went nuclear by choosing to filibuster every single one of President's nominees. And that's the nuclear option. We're having to react to Chuck Schumer's nuclear option.
Okay, so I really have about a minute here, Senator, and I know you got to get back to work here. But we're also looking at end of the fiscal year, and like I said, I'm getting pretty pessimistic about the way the funding battle is shaping up. Can you give us any insight into where negotiations are?
The House and the Senate Republicans are prepared to do the 12 appropriation bills. We're prepared to also keep the government open by funding a short-term CR, clean CR if we have to. I'm afraid Chuck Schumer is going to lead us into a Schumer shutdown. And why I say that is because we can put 47 votes on the board all day long. We can probably put 51. I don't think we can get all 53 Republicans to support a CR. But even if we got all 53, it still takes 60 to pass a funding bill inside the United States Senate outside of reconciliation. And so we have to have Democrats to agree with us on this. Chuck Schumer, who has voted for every CR except once in 2017 when he forced the government shutdown at that time, has supported a CR, but he is saying now he won't because he's scared of AOC running against him in the Senate. So I'm afraid there's a likelihood we end up going to a shutdown.
This is going to be wild. All right, Senator, come back and talk to me before the end of the month if you can.
All right,
it's so fun. Dwayne's coming in here, handing me stacks of breaking news. This is very exciting. I feel like I'm at a real news desk here. Thank you, Dwayne. Appreciate this. We had a lot of breaking news during the break here. First of all, the Supreme Court is temporarily allowing Trump to pause billions in foreign aid, which is terrific because, again, when you're the president, you can do stuff and you're allowed to try to do things. And if the Supreme Court wants to come in and say you can't, then that's okay. And then you try something else. And that needs to be the attitude that has been Trump's attitude. Lower courts might block stuff, and then it moves up to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court can allow for things. It's a trustworthy Supreme Court, isn't it? It's not overly right-wing, as I document in my book, Breaking the Law, which he's been kind enough to promote. I think this is this CNN? It looks like CNN. What am I reading? This is CNN. Justice Roberts allowing the Trump administration to freeze billions in foreign aid payments for now, putting hold on a lower court ruling. Roberts, who handles emergency appeals from federal courts in Washington, D.C., issued what's known as an administrative stay, a temporary order intended to give the justices more time to review the case. The order does not necessarily indicate how the court will ultimately resolve the appeal, though it could make it harder for the groups that sued over the cuts to recover the money approved by Congress. So that's great. And so foreign aid needs to have high standards. I'm a pro-foreign aid guy in a lot of ways, and I don't think everything needs to be a quid pro quo all the time, but we should be either getting information, or we should be getting access to something, or we should be getting some benefit in terms of whatever deals we're cutting with these nations. And sometimes it just seems like foreign aid is a given, that we're doing welfare for the world, and Trump using it as a bargaining chip, as a piece of leverage. We need to restore that. That's the sane approach to foreign aid. If foreign aid is used as a bargaining chip for us to increase America's position in the world, then it's a good thing. And if foreign aid is used basically just because someone in yesteryear, particularly a Democrat or some left-winger, decided that we're going to do welfare somewhere else because it's a good political talking point for us, that needs to be checked out. And if those nations are hostile to us and hostile to our president and hostile to America's policies, then we use it as the art of the deal. It's part of negotiation, good news, and it's nice that the Supreme Court backs us up, because that makes life so much easier. Because as I recommend over and over again, we don't want to go around court orders. We absolutely do not want to do that. It's bad strategy, and thus far, Trump has been perfect in that regard. All right, more good news, and I will preface it by replaying a clip that we played at the top of the show. This was cut one of the day. This is Jack Reed on CNN. You got to listen to this, because then when I read to you this truth bomb that came out from President Trump, you're going to see exactly how wrong the statement is. Play cut one here, Dwayne.
Well, this certainly diminishes the prospects of returning the hostages, and particularly those who are still alive, because what Hamas is saying right now is that the United States lured these people into Qatar in order to set up the Israeli strike. So that undercuts our ability to be an interlocutor and someone that can help moderate a peace. And it certainly increases their disbelief in whether Netanyahu is serious about a ceasefire and a release of the hostages.
That's good. Thank you. So my take on that at the top of the show today, 3-hour show. Remember, it's not that long of a show. You guys got 3 hours every day for the news with Hugh. My take is that no, this is the opposite. Is that this is going to make it more likely hostages are going to get released, because Trump is so unpredictable in the region. And Israel's come out, Netanyahu has said, this was us, it was only us, America didn't have anything to do with it, it was just us who carried out this attack. And those of you who are unfamiliar, there's a successful attack by Israel on Hamas bosses in Qatar who are hiding out, and usually 5-star hotels, stuff like that, in exile there. America has forged a greater partnership with Qatar, so it makes you think we have a base there, which is a big deal. It makes you wonder if Trump was in on it. You would think he would have been, given our connections to Qatar, which is getting better. So overall, I thought that this was something that probably would strengthen our negotiating position, because it shows that Netanyahu and Trump are serious about bringing this thing to a close soon. And of course, Senator Reid says, no, of course not. No, this is terrible. Well, here's the truth bomb that Trump just fired off. I'm pleased to report Elizabeth Surkov, a Princeton student whose sister is an American citizen, was just released by a militant Hezbollah affiliate and is now safely in the American embassy in Iraq after being tortured for many months. I will always fight for justice and never give up. Hamas, release the hostages now. So this wasn't Hamas, it was a Hezbollah group. But we get a hostage immediately after. We think that's a coincidence. So this bomb gets dropped and the hostage is already out. Trump is continuing his truth bombs, and I'll read one for you when we come back. But he's on the offense here. He wants this thing done. He wants the world cleaned up because he's a builder. He doesn't want to fix other people's messes. The war, that October 7th would not have happened if Joe Biden had had a failed foreign policy. The Ukraine war, the Russian invasion wouldn't have happened without Joe Biden's failed foreign policy. And Trump doesn't want these problems on his plate. He wants them off his plate so he can get back to doing what he does best, which is building. So that's what's happening here. I'm Alex Marlow. I'm the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. And I also want to encourage you to check out salemnewschannel.com, where I appear on the weekends, and Hugh's show is on 5 days a week. So maybe you're watching it there and you get to see all the cool visuals we're putting up, all the clips. So we're doing TV show too, not just radio. It's double. Everything's TV though now. Speaking of TV, we got a TV guy on the line with us, Byron York, Washington Examiner, chief political correspondent. You guys see him on Fox all the time as well, at Byron York. On X, the Everything app. Byron, huge news day, obviously. I want to get your take quickly on the Doha strike. Do you think America is involved at all? What do you think this means for the prospect of bringing this thing home for a peace? What do you think happens next?
Well, I'm just going by what the president posted actually just a few minutes ago on Truth Social, which certainly doesn't sound like the United States was involved. He said the U.S. military. Trump, was notified by the U.S. military and called this an unfortunate decision, talked about Qatar being a sovereign ally and close ally of the United States, and saying this doesn't advance Israel or America's goals, does concede that eliminating Hamas is a good thing.
Right, yeah. Can I read, Byron, if you don't mind for a second? I want to read from this because I have it in front of me and I was meaning to read it to the audience anyway. But this is the key portion of a very long Truth Social post. This is a decision made by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was not a decision made by me. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza is a worthy goal. That to me seems like him being take him seriously but not literally type situation here, Byron. I mean, to me, I can't imagine this took place without Trump being made aware of it and Trump understanding that you don't hit anything that is going to cause problems for me, but you take out Hamas and I can live with it. I mean, that's what I'm reading here. Am I reading it wrong?
Well, if you listen to the White House briefing today, they basically asked, because Trump had posted, I think 2 days ago, a message that, like, Hamas, this is your last chance. You got to release these hostages, and then this is your last chance. And people asked, did Trump know what was coming?
Yeah, sounds like it.
The White House spokeswoman insisted that he did not. So, listen, what's the truth? I don't know. But clearly Trump felt he needed to say that he disapproved of this. And I do think
yes.
It's one thing that's come out pretty clearly in this message and other things that Trump has said about the Israel-Gaza thing, as well as the Ukraine war thing, is that I think Trump, when he came into office with so much momentum, certainly domestically, felt that he would be able, with the two big wars going on at the time he took office, to just tell everybody to stop. I'm telling you right now, just stop, and they would. And that hasn't happened. And
yes.
So I do think you get this sense of frustration in Trump's voice that there have been actually smaller conflicts in the world that he actually kind of has been able to tell them.
Yeah, a lot.
But not with these.
Yeah, but the way I'm interpreting this is with that statement that this is your last warning and then this happens. And I think the nature of America's, improving relationship with Qatar, the fact we have a base there, it does make you think that Netanyahu would be a crazy person to do this without America knowing. And I don't think he is. I think he's a rational person. So anyway, I'm trying to piece all the puzzle pieces together. But overall, do you view this as a positive? Because I've been playing some clips on Democrats very quick to get behind a microphone or in front of a camera to announce that this is going to hurt negotiations. But then immediately we learn that Hezbollah has released a new hostage. It makes you wonder if this could actually work.
Well, obviously Israel has taken out an enormous number of its enemies since October 7th. They've just been kind of clearing the decks. And I certainly, all of this has had positive effects in the short run for them. When I heard of the shooting on the bus that killed 5 people yesterday or the day before, you thought to yourself, Israel's enemies have no other way to do this. So if they can get somebody to strap on a bomb or shoot up a bus, to be killed, the suicide attackers, they'll do that. I think that Israel will be facing many years of blowback for all of this. Yep. And obviously it has flattened Gaza. I don't know how many people have been killed. I don't trust the Palestinian health authorities. I don't trust these numbers.
Right.
But we do know incredible physical damage in Gaza, where just huge percentages of buildings have been destroyed or heavily damaged. It's just a moonscape. So they got a lot of problems coming up in the next many years.
So we've got a couple of minutes left, but I do want to get your take on the other story that is dominating media, particularly social media, which is this train attack in North Carolina where we have a man stabbing a woman in the neck. It's a black man. He says, I got the white girl. The media seems to be trying to act as though it's not a racial hate crime. It's something else. And if they even are bothered to cover it at all, what is the appropriate response to this? Not just from us in the public. What should authorities be doing to try to rein in the fact that our cities have just become incredibly lawless?
Well, the local authorities in Charlotte and a lot of other places should stop letting violent criminals out over and over and over again when they're arrested for violent crimes. They should stop doing that. This guy was released 14 times before this.
That's right.
So now he's, in custody for the 15th time. I mean, why don't they just release him now? I mean, what good is it going to do? Not going to bring anybody back. So they should stop doing that. They should stop releasing people like that. They should change a lot of their ideology on this. I think that's unlikely to happen. The racial aspect of it, I'm not sure how that plays out. But I do know that the revolution in cameras that has taken place over the last many years has really changed Americans' perceptions of crime. And this whole story never goes to the place it is now without this video.
Exactly right. It's very important, and it makes the penalty for lying to us in the media even greater, because there's probably a video out there and you can get to the bottom of it. Byron York, Washington Examiner, and Fox News for all his stuff. Thanks, Byron. Caroline Leavitt was absolutely destroying the media over this incident where we have a person who's been released 14 times, apparently murdering a Ukrainian refugee on public transit in North Carolina. We get some audio of this, and it really is can't miss television. So let's play some of this here from Cut 12 here, Mr. Duane.
Documented criminal history. When Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Arena should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities. And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer. Here's the truth that every American must know. Too many innocent people across the country continue to pay the price of the failed experiment known as cashless bail that has been championed by the Democrat Party for years. All the way back in 2020, North Carolina's then Democrat Governor Roy Cooper established a so-called task force for racial equity in criminal justice. Sounds nice, but it's not. That task force was co-authored by then Attorney General and current Democrat Governor Josh Stein. It recommended, quote, reimagining public safety to, quote, promote diversion and other alternatives to arrest. It also advised to de-emphasize some felony crimes, prioritize, quote, restorative justice, and eliminate cash bail. Democrats in North Carolina and nationwide are consumed with pushing a woke, soft-on-crime agenda, no matter how many innocent Americans suffer as a result. Instead of aggressively prosecuting and locking up violent criminals, the Democrat-backed cashless bail approach lets these criminals roam free in our country.
That's good, guys. It's hard to interrupt because she's so good and she's got all the stuff at her fingertips and is deeply organized and is just doing the work the establishment media should do. But all these stories are connected. All the biggest stories of the year all remain connected. The ongoing lawfare against President Trump, the resistance to enforcing our immigration laws, the insistence that our cities are much safer than they already are. This is all a political game. It's all a political game that the left is playing to try to keep our cities chaotic, where criminals thrive and citizens suffer and live in fear. That's not the America that we want. It's not the America we deserve, and we're fighting back right now. On the Hugh Hewitt Show and on the Salem News Channel, I'm Alex Marlow. This is the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. Really happy to be here today and tomorrow as well. If you like what you're hearing or seeing, please check out my YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, and give me a subscribe, and I appreciate it very much. I think you'll like it. Daily news show, cover a lot of ground, and one of the things that's happened to me recently is I've been focused on lawfare against President Trump, doing a deep dive, my latest book, Breaking the Law, which Hugh has been very kind enough to promote, and we connected over it, and we've kind of struck up a friendship over it. I'm trying to put into words exactly how law and order has been debased in this country. And there's a couple components of it. There's the obvious stuff, which is the lawfare against President Trump, the 6 major cases that I break down, and I'll share one of them with you momentarily. But it really is a whole culture that the left hates law and order. And I think that is the basis of a lot of the news cycles that we're witnessing today, from the fact that the media does not want to cover, and then if they do cover it, that they are trying to make it about a fringe MAGA issue when you've got this brutal murder in the middle of a public transit in an American city. The fact that President Trump wants to enforce immigration laws that had not been enforced in cities like Chicago or Los Angeles. The fact that he wants to restore law and order in our nation's capital to try to clean it up, beautify it, make it a place where it is something we can be proud of. And that yet it is met with resistance across the board, and people are trying to figure out why Trump even wants to do these things. Well, it's because law and order is not a left-wing thing, because they've conditioned us, they've conditioned their own voter base, their own elected leaders at this point, to think that enforcing the law is racist. Think about the way that we handled the George Floyd situation years ago in 2020, where George Floyd gets killed. He's on fentanyl, he's avoiding arrest. It's portrayed as the worst racial hate crime in the history of the world. And the whole response is lawlessness. This is mid-coronavirus, mid-lockdown, and all of a sudden it was normalized to go out into the street, torch cities, to be able to break windows, to be able to smash and grab loot. And all that got normalized and was explained away as a symptom, as hurt people hurting people, as Van Jones might say. This is what has been elevated, what's been glorified on the left. And we now have on the right a historic opportunity to restore law and order. And we have to have a lot of wherewithal in order to do so, because at every turn it appears as though we're being explained that it is some sort of a act of racial hatred or animosity in order to try to bring law and order back to our streets. And I'll tell you, it's shaping up to be a law and order election, and it's happening each and every day. Hugh told me after reading Breaking the Law that his favorite quote in the book was how I referred to hundreds of presidents when I was talking about all these lower court judges who had blocked elements of Trump's agenda unilaterally via temporary restraining orders or injunctions, etc., and acting as though that they had a veto over the executive branch. So hundreds of presidents was my phrase. My favorite line in the book is this one, and let me read it to you. Laws that were on the books were not applied to criminals in our cities or illegal aliens invading our country, while laws that didn't really exist were imposed on Trump and his supporters. That's the point that I like the most. That's the point that I think is essential to the book, is that we are seeing laws that are being blatantly ignored. In fact, encouraged. You're encouraged to break the law in my home state of California, and Hughes as well, when it comes to immigration laws. You're encouraged to flaunt the laws if you are a person who is who is committing a petty crime, for example. In LA, we have this thing called a Gascon special, where people know that if you only commit a certain level of crime, then you're going to be able to be back on the street the next day because there's cashless bail, and you'll be back out being ready to torment your fellow man instantly. And people know, they calibrate exactly what they can get away with and what sort of damage they can do in order to get back on the street and released the next day. The same attitude permeates our media, who does not want Tom Homan to be able to enforce immigration laws. We got some clips. I want to share this one. Do we like to cut 6 or cut 7 better, guys? Whichever one. Give me a sense of, you guys can have, this is Tom Homan on MSNBC. He's with Mika and the crew.
Let's go with cut 6. It's better.
We're going to go with cut 6. Check out this masterclass here from
I see on the show this morning you have Governor Healy talking about ICE doing enforcement operations at a church. Mm-hmm. False. Didn't happen.
They were parked there. They did not do an operation there. She said they were parked in a public space legally.
But to say that and to push that out there puts fear in the immigrant community. So let me tell you what's happening.
That puts fear in the community. Right. To park the ICE agent's vehicle
they're on a
near
public
a church.
Street.
They're on a public street. She said
they're on a public street,
sir.
waiting to respond to a criminal alien release pulled aside the road. Let me tell you, in the last couple of days, what's happened in Boston. They've arrested Victor Gomez Perez, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Guatemala, with charges of aggravated rape, assault and battery with dangerous weapon, indecent assault and battery on a victim 14 years or younger. They arrested Kaylee Espinosa, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Colombia, with charges of aggravated aggravated assault on a pregnant victim. They arrested Joshua Gonzalez, a 23-year-old criminal alien from Dominican Republic, with charges for trafficking heroin, morphine, opium, resisting police, disorderly conduct, and drug distribution. They also arrested Samuel Armando Barrera, a 20-year-old criminal illegal alien from Guatemala, pending charges for assault and battery on a child. So Mayor Wu and Governor Healy, they ought to be calling ICE and thanking them for making their streets safer, for protecting their communities and taking these people off the street. They've turned a blind eye to this. They're sanctuary cities. Sanctuaries, cities and sanctuary states are sanctuaries for criminals. Give ICE access to the jail to arrest a bad guy in the jail rather than have to go in the community to find them. Because when you go in the community and find them, it puts ICE officers at greater risk. It puts the community at greater risk. It puts the alien at greater risk because anything can happen on a street arrest. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prioritize public safety threats when you got governors and mayors who are releasing these public safety threats every day into the community. That causes the crime rate, and we've seen some terrible incidents in the last few days where innocent victims are murdered. This past year, I've seen innocent Americans raped and murdered by people who are not supposed to be here. So rather than going back and forth and say, well, ICE has got a car parked near a church, that is ridiculous. You're out there looking for people like this, exactly what they're doing.
All right, guys.
I would argue
this is a perfect breakdown of what's happened. And what Tom Homan is doing is he's taking a stand for the citizens of this country. What's happened is that the left is now prioritizing the shoplifters, the illegal aliens, the 14-time released felons. That's who they take as the people who should be controlling this country. Think about what happened at MacArthur Park in Los Angeles a few months ago, where ICE was there and they were acting as though this was some sort of a beautiful park, and that ICE had ruined it somehow by coming in. Well, what were they doing? They were trying to get the drug dealers out of the park, the illegal aliens who were running drugs out of the park. It wasn't a park for citizens. It wasn't a park for my children who pay taxes in the city. It was a park for illegal aliens and homeless people. Why do we have that as our standard? Why have we accepted it as our standard? And finally, we have an administration who's saying, well, maybe that's not the way to run a country. Maybe it's better to run a country where you try to elevate, where you try to be aspirational, where you try to cater to the people who are the most productive in society instead of the people who are the least productive, who have no right to be here at all. And the entire attitude of the Democrat Party can be summed up as follows. Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, at a press conference talking about immigration enforcement in her city. Let's play cut 8, guys.
Let me just say, we will bring justice to this issue, to our community. We will not stand for this type of discrimination and racism. Thank you.
It's discrimination and racism to try to enforce immigration laws. Black Americans know that American cities are getting overrun by crime. They know it. Mexican Americans are increasingly, Latino Americans, Hispanic Americans are increasingly moving towards Republicans because they know this is all nonsense. They want law and order too. They believe in conservative values as well. It is only people who are brainwashed and too much MSNBC and too much CNN and too much fear-mongering going on, acting as though Trump and Homan are rounding up American citizens. Name one American citizen that's been rounded up and deported. They're not doing that. They're trying to get the bad guys out of this country so that the normal people can live, can use our parks, can ride a train without being in fear. And people who are standing in the way of this need to be removed from office as soon as humanly possible. He's got some of the best sponsors around. AmericanFederal.com is one of them. 800-221-7694 is the number there. There are many good reasons to buy gold and silver, bank failures, and digital currency volatility. AmFed coin and bullion is my choice for precious metals. If you ask AmFed owner Nick Grovich to simplify the case for precious metals, he'll tell you, when President Roosevelt recalled the gold in circulation and paid people with paper money, they received a $20 bill for a $20 gold piece. Today, that $20 bill won't even fill half your gas tank. I got one of those gas guzzlers, so I don't think I get about a tenth of a tank for that. But the gold price worth over $3,600. Which would you rather own? AmFed coin and bullion. Nick's been in the industry for 42 years. He's proud to provide transparency, fair pricing to build trusted relationships. If you're interested in buying or selling, call Nick and his team at AmFed coin and bullion 800-221-7694. That's AmericanFederal.com. AmericanFederal.com. Good ad for John Carney. Do we have John? Is he set up, or should I keep rolling with the news here? Okay, so we're going to get John here. We're going to talk about the economy, what's going on. So Joe Biden, one last humiliation, and the Biden inflation, of course, was what he was known for the most. But we've been living in a environment where he has gotten away with something that is just unbelievable. 911,000 fewer jobs than were reported. And we just learned this. So through March of 2025, so this is basically Joe Biden's tenure, a couple of weeks into Trump's. But overall, this is the largest on-record revision we've ever seen, suggesting that job growth during that period was running at roughly half the pace we initially believed. And we believed this up until a minute ago. So everything was weaker about the economy. We knew it was weak. We knew that there was this Biden inflation. We knew that there was this... the economy was not on as strong of a footing as we'd come to expect from America, and yet all we would do is continue to deficit spend it, to continue to pump money from the federal government into the public to try to solve all of our problems. And then what we learned here is that actually things were much worse than we thought. And this also is really relevant because we've been talking a lot about the Bureau of Labor Statistics and why it is so hard to get reliable data. People suggesting that Trump's cooking the data, Trump suggesting maybe the data he's getting is cooked, Trump's nominee's getting held up when he's trying to get in guys who can try to actually read the data. And then we see the biggest revision of all time. And it's one of these things where you got to wonder who's even making these calls. Where are these numbers coming from? And this is also a reminder that Jerome Powell is correctly been labeled as moving too slow because, as John Carney writes for us at Breitbart News, the revision also highlights the risk the Federal Reserve miscalibrated policy. In late 2024, the central bank lowered interest rates 3 times between September and December, but has left them in place for Donald Trump. And in recent months, job growth has slowed to a crawl, and the revisions show that it was weaker even before Trump took office, which means we knew the Fed was slow. But they were even slower than we thought because they probably should have been cutting a long time ago. And if we'd had these numbers in, then we would have seen those cuts before. So this is the latest pattern of large revisions where it seems like over and over again, we are seeing the Federal Reserve, we're seeing the data that we are supposed to that our stock market is based off of, that a lot of policy is based off of, that a lot of Federal Reserve policy is based off of data that from occasionally just seems completely plucked out of whole cloth. And this is just the latest example of that. And it's something that is got to be enraging for President Trump. But it's also something that does make you continue to lose trust in the system. And I think this is part of the discussion that we continue to have, is that a lot of people, particularly those who are hyper online individuals who get a lot of their information about the world just from what they're able to consume while they're on the internet, on X, the Everything app, you're starting to see people that are now questioning everything. It really goes into a lot of the vaccine discussion that we've had. And I've been a big supporter of Robert Kennedy, and I think he's going to be, I think he continues to use the science and be reliable with the science. But it's part of the reason why you might see people in your feed online start questioning vaccines that are really strong. I do think this is all related because you see the measles vaccine, you see the polio vaccine. These are things that have traditionally been strong. They have very low side effects, and we basically eradicated some horrible infectious diseases. But now you see people who are thinking, well, we were lied to about the COVID vaccine, so how do we know we're not being lied to about these ones? Well, actually, sometimes we do get some stuff right. But when you cry wolf over and over again, then you stop trusting the one time the wolf is actually there about to eat your sheep. And this is the whole point here, that we are losing faith in the numbers that are being reported by the federal government to the public. And we see this time and again where revisions all seem to keep going in the same direction, that whereas things were better for President Trump upon revision and things were worse for Joe Biden upon revision. And that's the pattern that we're seeing over and over and over again. And it is something that is, I think, going to cause a lot of consternation with the public because people are trying to get reliable information. They're trying to feel like they're able to trust what's going on in our country. And it's hard to do that when all of a sudden they'll dump information like this on you and you're not even, it's like out of nowhere. It's like, oh, by the way, things were so much worse. And then Joe Biden, who even knows what level of competence he had. I never bought for a second there's a cover-up of his mental health. We all knew he was decrepit. We all knew that he was lying to us. I wrote a book called Breaking Biden. It was my second book where I researched the Biden family. And his doctors has said that his whole problems were sleep apnea and a stiff gait. That was the only thing we've been told about Joe Biden. Other than that, we knew that Joe Biden was supposed to be in perfect health. The fact that he didn't have much of a schedule, the fact that he was always constantly napping on a beach, the fact that he would always confuse his wife and his sister. I mean, the corn pop rant, I mean, that's all you need to know, right? I mean, he's talking about Bill Wright Mouse doing all the pools. And he called black kids roaches in that speech, which is a racial slur, which didn't bother anyone at the time because Joe Biden had the right politics. You call them black kids roaches in 2017, and people were thinking, I think this guy's a little off. I think something happened to him. Maybe he got dropped in his head a few too many times. He had brain aneurysms and he had multiple surgeries decades ago, and we're supposed to think that had no effect on him into his 80s. So there's no cover-up. We all knew, but people were able to tolerate it because they hated Trump so much that they were not willing to report the truth. And so then the big question is, to connect all these back together, is that when you see a revision like this, who was protecting Joe Biden? Who is protecting the Biden administration? And how come those protections somehow ended? How come we were able to figure it out now? And that's the stuff I do want to get into when we finally get Carney locked in here, which hopefully we can do during the next break. But this is one of these things that I think is so essential to restoring the faith in our system, because we do not want to walk around paranoid. We do not want to walk around feeling as though people do not have our nation's best interests at heart. We want to believe that the people who are in our government at a minimum are willing to give us the truth and at least do their best to try to restore trust in our public institutions. That's what's suffering here. That's what I think took a huge hit during the coronavirus, and it continues to take a hit after the establishment tried to take out Donald Trump with the Russiagate hoax. They tried to clearly cover for Joe Biden with the auto pen scandal, which is a legit scandal and a real scandal. And then the system being applied with lawfare to try to take out President Trump, which was election interference, trying to rig our elections via using the legal system. All the connective tissue here is it causes erosion in the fabric of what makes up America, what allows us to be able to exist, to be able to thrive, to be able to build families, build businesses. If we start losing faith in basic stuff like the jobs data, then that's going to cause too much chaos for me. John Carney's with me. He's the economic and finance editor at Breitbart News, and he works on the Breitbart Business Digest, which is a must read if you're not a subscriber. And I pinch hit for him on that from time to time. And I have to say, I feel like I'm a witness to greatness on that thing. John, we had a lot to talk about today, but I want to start with this unbelievable revision of Joe Biden's job numbers down 911,000, which is a record revision. First of all, I want to get the data, the stats, what actually happened, but then I want to know how this is possible and why it seems like we're getting this pattern of bad data, because it is deeply disturbing, and I do think this shows a lot of national mistrust in the system. But first, the numbers.
Sure. What the government announced today is that their estimates of the jobs created between March 2024 and March 2025, so basically Biden's final year in office, was overcounted the jobs by 911,000. That's the highest overcount there has ever been, so the highest downward revision. That brings down the monthly jobs number from what we thought was about 147,000 on average during those 12 months to just less than half of that, so 70,000. That's a really extremely important difference, because when you go from 150,000, that's enough where you are balancing the total number of, enough jobs that you're replacing enough people who are coming into the economy to coming down to, not enough jobs to employ all the new people coming into the economy. That's a big problem. It means basically that the jobs for the last year of Biden's administration were very weak rather than the strong numbers we thought we were getting.
Okay, so how could we possibly airball it by this much when it comes to the numbers?
So that's a good question. Like I said, this is the record high. It has never been this many jobs in the past. This big of a revision. It is now, of course, the numbers go up and down, over time. But we've now had 2 years of extremely large revision. Remember last year, around this time, they announced that it was going to be around over 800,000 jobs. It actually ended up being lower than that. It was closer to 600,000 jobs that they revised out of the estimates. But this is a really, really big error. It shows, I think, that they needed to make corrections after the last really big revision. They really should have looked back and said, what have we been doing that we're getting it so wrong? And they didn't do it. One of the reasons they didn't do it, frankly, is the error was in their favor. It was making the Biden administration look good. And so I think they were not incentivized to say, how do we fix this so the errors aren't this big?
So who's responsible for this? Because it feels like a lot of people are saying that Trump is the one who gives us bad data, and then Trump accuses others of giving him bad data. So who's really responsible? Do we know who these people are?
Yeah, so look, I want to say that the people who are like the line workers at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're who put this data out. They're actually they're extremely honest, hardworking people, but they can only use the data that they're given and the techniques that they are given to assemble this data. What they really needed was better leadership from the top of the BLS to say, after the last large revision, okay, what have we been doing wrong? How could we make the data more accurate? Now, look, I get it. The economy has gone through a lot of gyrations since the pandemic and during the pandemic, but that shouldn't still be happening. We shouldn't be having revisions that are this large. So they really needed leadership from the top. They didn't get it. And Trump fired that person. And I think now that actually, that was controversial when he fired her. But I think now it looks pretty wise that they lacked leadership at the top of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the Department of Labor. And they needed to have somebody who was really going to say, how can we do a better job next time? Trump has a new appointee, E.J. Antoni. I think that's going to be his number one mission is let's fix the data. Let's make sure we're not making, errors that are this large, that we're this far off from where we should be.
Right, and that's provided that Antoni gets through, and it's a controversial pick, and there's a lot of objections to him. So this could be a big fight that could take place, and perhaps Trump will have to go a different direction with this appointment.
I think this helps him, Alex. I think it helps EJ because when Trump removed the head of the BLS, there was controversy about whether or not she should be removed. Now it seems to be he can say, yeah, she needed to go.
You had one job. This is the proverbial you had one job meme. John, stay right there. When we come back, I'm going to get your take on the latest trade policy machinations and how the Fed's role in moving too slow, given this new data that we've got. I'm Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News, and Hugh is in the house. He just walked in because he comes in on his day off. That's the type of guy Hugh is. He comes in, he immediately says to me, "You look great." And I'm on pins and needles. And then he says, "You sound great too." Okay, good. Thank God. Thank you, Hugh, for having me in. John Carney is with me. He is our economic and finance editor at Breitbart News. John, two big questions here for you. The first one is just to wrap up this data revision. This again makes Jerome Powell and the Fed look really slow, and Trump he gets the branding right. Sometimes it takes a while for it to set in and see, is Trump really right about this? Again, it makes it look like Jerome Powell moving very slow on the Fed policy. Break it down for us.
That's absolutely right. The Fed is way behind the curve. Look, they already were. We already saw the data just from the last couple of months. The Fed should have cut at least back this spring. Now we know that the labor market was much weaker than it looked. And frankly, that the Fed really, they saw the beginnings of the labor market weakening at the end of the Biden administration. They really clamped down when Trump got elected and they stopped cutting interest rates. They shouldn't have done that. They should have kept going with their policy of cuts. Interest rates are now way too high for the economy. The job market, the job growth has been much weaker. Look, I get it. Powell can only look at the data he actually has. This data makes it look much worse. And as you were saying, it makes Trump look really good. Trump has been right. The Fed should not have been keeping interest rates as high as they were. The economy is begging for an interest rate cut. They're going to get it. The Fed is going to cut next week. There's no doubt about it. The real question is just how much do they cut the next week, and then how much do they cut in the subsequent months? There's 2 more meetings this year, another in January. They probably should signal that they're going to cut at every single one of those meetings.
Yeah, what's interesting to me here, John, is that you've got the Fed policy, which was so slow to raise rates at the beginning of the financial trouble, shall we say, if not a crisis, under Joe Biden, and now they've been so slow to lower rates. And the reason why they're so slow to lower rates is presumably because they want to see how the tariffs do. And so the tariffs are working. We got a ton of money coming into the Treasury, and we are on pins and needles to see what the Supreme Court is going to decide, whether or not the Supreme Court is going to uphold Trump's ability to tariff people, which is interesting. And you're an attorney, so maybe you can opine on that for me here in a second. But when you look at the fact that the tariff policy is really what's slowing down the Fed and the tariffs are working, could they indicate maybe we get it, we've seen enough, we're happy to cut?
Yeah, I do think that they are going to say, that's it, we're going to cut. Christopher Waller, who's one of the Fed governors, has actually been saying that the Fed was making a mistake by letting tariffs delay the cuts. Because, look, Powell has actually said they would have been cutting if not for the tariffs. One of the most annoying things that Powell and the Fed has been doing is every month when we get data that shows that tariffs aren't pushing up prices, they say, well, we think they're still going to happen. So we're going to wait till we see that happen. Then we'll judge the extent of it, and then maybe we'll cut. So rather than being data dependent, the Fed has kind of become data defiant. They see data, they say it doesn't match their expectations, so they don't adjust policy. I think that's over now. I think that this jobs revision and the low inflation we've seen for the last couple of months is going to be enough to make the Fed say, that's it, we're definitely going to cut. So the September cut is coming. The market is now pricing in cuts in October, and then the next meeting is in December, and it's now starting to price in January. Right now, I think basically we're at least 100 basis points, meaning 1 full percentage point above where the Fed should be, probably should be even lower than that. The Fed's got to hurry up and get there. Whether that's a quarter point in the next 4 meetings, I think they should actually go even further, do a 50 basis point cut right away, show the market they're serious about this, get that interest rate lower. That will take the weight of interest rates off the labor market and let jobs start to grow again in America.
Absolutely agree. All right, so we got some big tariff news happening. So the Supreme Court again agreeing to consider whether most of Trump's tariffs are legal, but now Trump is pressuring the EU to hit China and India with 100% tariffs to pressure Putin. What do you make of this, John?
So one of the great things that Trump is trying to do is not just use tariffs to repair the U.S. economy, but also as a great tool of diplomacy. He says, look, trade is, obviously one of the most important things to all the countries in the world. And so we shouldn't just think of it as, using it to protect our, the vital industries in the U.S. Yes, that's important. But he has also used trade to force countries to cooperate on things like illegal immigration, on fentanyl. And now he's telling Europe, look, we want you also to make sure that countries aren't funding Putin's war in Ukraine by purchasing the oil. And if they won't stop purchasing Russian oil, then raise tariffs on them. He's inviting Europe, in other words, to come along with what we're doing, which is saying to India in particular, we're already going to raise tariffs on China, but to India in particular, look, we want to be your friends. But if you are going to insist on, because India's playing a very funny game here, what they do is they buy Russian oil, refine it, and then sell it back into the open market. We want them to cut that out. It's just a profit motive. They don't need to do this. They could just buy oil from everybody else in the world.
John, a remarkable thing that's happening is that small businesses are not raising prices because their profits are going up from tariffs. I want you to explain why. We're going to have a couple minutes when we come back on the show. We're going to wrap up with this. This is going to be a treat for you guys. You're going to get an explanation of why prices are not going up despite the tariffs, the thing the left and the establishment don't want you to know about. John's going to break it down. All right, Alex Marlowe here for Hugh. What a great day. Thanks to Dwayne. Thanks to Adam. Thanks to Harley for helping me out here. And if all of you like what you heard, please subscribe to the Alex Marlowe Show, wherever you get your podcasts, especially I think YouTube is the one that people like the most. So I think the Suits like that one the most. But anywhere is good. CLMNewsChannel.com on the weekends. You can find it over there. But it's a daily news show, podcast. And Breaking the Law, my book that Hugh's been so kind to promote, is out now and doing very well. And thanks to friends like you. We got a great sponsor, webroot.com/Hewitt. So promo code Hewitt on this one. Do you see the news last week? TransUnion confirmed a massive data breach. Over 4 million people were impacted. And sadly, this kind of thing is becoming all too common. That's why we always tell people it's not enough to just have antivirus anymore. You need real all-in-one protection. That's exactly what you get with WebRoot Total Protection. It covers identity protection for up to 10 identities, up to $1 million in fraud expense reimbursement, and 24/7 U.S.-based customer support. Love that, U.S.-based. That's good. It includes a dedicated elder fraud hotline. That's important. It even monitors your identity and the dark web for signs of trouble. You get antivirus, a secure VPN, and cloud backup so your devices, your privacy, and your personal information are protected from every angle. If your identity is stolen, it can take 100 to 200 hours to fix everything on your own, but WebRoot Total Protection gives you insurance for digital life, your digital life, and gives you your peace of mind. Webroot.com/Hewitt is the website. Don't wait. Get 50% off today at webroot.com/Hewitt. 2 T's on Hewitt, but you guys knew that. All right, John Carney, I teased, is going to help me wrap up Breitbart Business Digest, a must-get. Breitbart.com always, but the Breitbart Business Digest in particular. John, small businesses not raising prices because the tariff profit is so big. How can this be?
Yeah, look, everybody said that the businesses were going to get squeezed. It's not happening. Their profits are rising, and they're not raising prices. The latest small business survey showed that the lowest percentage since the start of the year of businesses say they're planning on raising prices or have raised prices. This is great. Business optimism is actually above its long-term average. Why is this? It's because people actually understand that Trump is repairing the economy, that the Biden years were really bad. We just saw this with the jobs revision. Trump is now with the one big beautiful law that is going to restore the tax cuts that Biden tried to take away. And then the tariffs are protecting U.S. industries without raising prices on consumers. It's working as Trump said it would. And basically, once we get the Fed out of the way, once those interest rates get cut, I think we're going to be off to the moon. Next year should be a really good year for the economy.
Carney, got 20 seconds. Image of capitalism is slipping, but socialism not getting better. How can that be?
Yeah, look, I'm afraid my hometown is going to elect a socialist mayor, New York City. But I think one of the reasons for that, frankly, is he offered them something that Trump has offered a lot of people, which is hope. Look at the other big city mayors. They say, get used to crime, get used to life falling apart. Right in Chicago, they tell you, if you live in a big city, you got to get used to it. Mandami promised
crime,
hope.
Illegal immigration, homelessness. That's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do. Great point, John. Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Hugh, of course. I'm Alex Marlowe. See you tomorrow.